What it do? Welcome to a new episode of Locked On Bucks. That's all I can really do, y'all, is sigh at this point. The Bucks lost by 10 to the Memphis Grizzlies. I was gonna say Memphis Hustle, but pretty much. This was just an embarrassing game coming off the heels of another embarrassing loss to the Washington Wizards. Let's not waste too much time on this cold intro and let's just get into the meat of this here.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Bucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Camille Davis, and you can catch me weekly on the Technical Foul podcast as well as the Pack a Day podcast. Joining me is Frank Madden, long-time voice of the pod and the founder of brewhoop.com. We do appreciate you tuning in, and we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast as well as on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. So visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. I don't know if you guys can tell the disappointment that's on my face, the disappointment that is in my voice. This was just flat out embarrassing once again. The Bucks lost to the Wizards last night in Washington. They lose today at home against the Memphis Grizzlies. They are now 1-4 over their last 5 games. The Bucks laid an egg tonight. I don't even really know where to begin with just how disappointing this particular loss was. I think it's even more so because what we just saw last night, and we're looking for today as a time for the Bucks to get back. Yes, they didn't have Dame. Yes, they did not have Khris. There was no Pat Bev. Understood. Yet and still, the shorthanded Bucks were outworked by an even more shorthanded Memphis Grizzlies team.
And Giannis got hurt, you know.
Yeah.
I think that's to me the biggest headline from this. Giannis was really bad offensively, really from the start, and hard to tell exactly when he aggravated the hamstring injury. He got blocked by Jake LaRavia and fell hard early in the game. And then finally, he was 3 out of 13, finally got to the basket and finished right before halftime and came down and grabbed at the back of his left leg, which is the hamstring that he's been on the injury report with for the past month or whatever. And then basically just didn't try on the other end of the court, couldn't box somebody out, gave up a layup to go into halftime. And, I was thinking okay, is he going to just do his Giannis thing and battle through this? Because it feels like he's not playing Friday the way that he was moving. And he came out and, the fact that he had 5 blocks and 4 of them were incredibly impressive. He had pretty crazy sequence in the third quarter where he had a block, went end-to-end dunked, had a couple of end-to-end dunks, which is just again, the fact that he's doing this on one leg practically speaks to just what he's able to do, his pain threshold. And, again, just that he just can will himself to do things that any normal person could never imagine. But he clearly wasn't right. And after the game, Doc Rivers said he wasn't right. He said Giannis kept saying he was fine. The medical people said he was fine, supposedly. But then Bach was saying he wishes he took him out in the third quarter. Mm-hmm. So, again, if you have tickets to Friday's game against the Raptors, who've lost, 15 in a row and have been outscored by 288 points, I would sell those as fast as you can because I would not want to see the Bucks potentially lose to that team because it's probably going to be without Giannis. And who knows if Dame's going to come back at that point because he's obviously coming back from the groin injury and they don't want to risk him either. And at this point, again, what I've been saying about this team all year, when they've got their best players, they're awesome. When anything is off, anybody's missing, except Giannis for some reason. They've won a bunch of games without Giannis playing somehow. But when Dame's out, they're horrendous. Obviously, when Khris was out for a long period, the offense went in the toilet. They're just a super fragile team, which speaks to the fact that, they've had 2 coaches and don't seem to have, obviously, a strong identity on offense at this point. They have Pat Connaughton running point guard, right? Which
knew that was coming. Yeah.
It's just it's still one of these kind of things you look back that's kind of baffling, right? I mean, John Horst went into like Campaign wasn't even on the roster until training camp, and they only were able to sign Campaign because of the trade opening up a roster spot with Dame coming in and two players going out. So I don't know, it's just very bizarre when you think about it, how little playmaking they've had all year. We saw Ty Washington randomly get minutes tonight. We saw Andre Jackson get minutes tonight. Shockingly, those guys were not the answer that, solved all the Bucks' problems. Of course not. They're young players and they've barely played. But yeah, I mean, it was just a crazy game. The Bucks shot 40% from three. What were they? The Bucks were 18 of 40 or
34.
something.
That's what kept them in the game. And
Yeah.
then they went cold at the end, missed their last 10 3-point attempts.
Yeah, Bucks were like plus 30 or something from the 3-point line. They deserved to miss a bunch because they were unsustainably hot. You knew that was I tweeted about it. Like, it scared the hell out of me that they were 14 of 27 from three. The Grizz were 5 of 17 going into the fourth quarter, and the Grizz were winning by a point. Like, that's a bad sign because like you're just like riding unsustainable 3-point shooting, and lo and behold, of course, they missed a bunch of threes in the fourth quarter because the game tends to even out. Yeah, the game tends to even out a little bit. So yeah, I mean, like, the Bucks were not a very talented team, especially once Giannis was, a shell of himself. And yeah, this team, like, right now is just like, I don't know what's going on in their heads, but they're in a really bad place. And I think most Bucks fans are too.
Yeah, can't blame them. Really can't blame them at this point, given what this team has put on tape the last 5 games here. You mentioned the Giannis injury, which I think is a great place to start, because even before he took that fall, like, he was missing just bunnies, and I was wondering, like, I wonder how he's feeling today. Second night of a back-to-back, coming in here, and we know that he's been dealing with that hamstring injury. We heard Giannis talk about how that's something that he doesn't even want to play around with for the most part. And hearing about Dame, like, okay, he has this groin injury. The team is looking to be cautious with him. Just don't want to aggravate anything, want to make sure he's healthy for the playoffs. Cool. Get that. Khris Middleton, we didn't expect him to play. That's not what he's done all season. He does not play the second night of a back-to-back. Again, the injury concerns, just trying to get him to the playoffs as healthy as possible. So to see Giannis out there, especially after he took that fall that you mentioned, and seeing him grabbing at his hamstring, I even saw him grabbing at it in the second half as well when he was looking better, because as you mentioned, he started off the game 4 of 14 from the field in the first half, which is very un-Giannis, like missing bunnies, just missing shots that he normally will make. And then in the second half, he goes 6 of 9, and you're like, okay, well, he's coming out, he's dunking, he's getting blocks, he's looking more Giannis-like. Okay, but then yet and still you see him grabbing at his hamstring. And to the quote that you were talking about with Doc Rivers, I just want to read it all the way through, because it's the ending of it that really had me just be like, okay. Doc, I thought Giannis did everything he could. Honestly, I'm not kidding. There were times in the beginning of the third where I talked to Scott 3 different times, wanted to take him out the game. Thought he was running on fumes. As a coach, you got to make a judgment call sometimes, and medical makes the call more. They kept saying he was okay, but I have eyes, and I just didn't like the way he was moving. And that is why I took him out. The one time early in the third quarter, he kept asking to go back in, and trainer said he was fine. So we kind of stuck there, but I wish I would have just said no, honestly. And with that quote, outside of what we talked about with him not just looking right, like the hamstring, like it was bothering him, but also that fatigue factor of it, right? Second night of a back-to-back, if he's looking like he doesn't have it and he's on fumes, like, we know those are times too when injuries can get more, like, they can get worse in situations like that. Hopefully that's not the case with Giannis, but like you said, I would expect that we don't see Giannis on Friday to give him some time to try to get right ahead of the playoffs, but we're going to have to see once we get there and the injury report starts coming out tomorrow. But in a game like this, where, as we mentioned, no Dame, no Khris, no Pat Bev, which, again, not using that as an excuse as to why the Bucks won. They should have still won this game based on the talent on the floor. But in a game like this, knowing that this is a team that when they're healthy, they're rolling, as you mentioned, it's kind of a fragile ecosystem around this team when pieces are missing. What do you take away from games like this? And are there any larger trends that we have seen that might indicate some problems forthcoming in the playoffs, or some things where it's like, that's actually not that big of a thing? We're going to dive more into that after this. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV, and it will provide you access to millions of movies, TV episodes, plus free and live TV. So whether it's the opening weekend for baseball or college basketball tournaments, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sport brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all of the latest in the world of sports. Not to mention, there's also great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos. So check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV as well as Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you really should. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/lockedonfiretv. At this time of the year, the sports calendar is loaded. I mean, MLB opening week is here. Brewers took their first L, but that is what it is at this point. You got the NBA right now getting ready to get into their playoff push, the playoff season. Same with NHL. In addition to that, you got the NCAA tournament, Final Four. Should be some really good games there as well. And FanDuel is making it even more exciting to get in on the action, because right now new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet the tourney, MLB, NBA, NHL, so much more. So visit fanduel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win. Again, check out fanduel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Bucks. Shout out to the everydayers who tune in Monday through Friday. Listen, y'all, I want y'all to make the switch over to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel, and it's programmed for you every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all of the extraness that go into it. Good analysis, good content. Locked On Sports today brings you all of the opinions, news, and can't miss analysis that you need in your sports life. Streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, before the break, I just asked, what do you take away from games like this? Are there any trends that stand out, so on and so forth? And even with the bodies missing, for me, one thing that stood out to me was just the points in the paint that were given up. Like, to give up 70 to Washington last night, Bucks scored 56 points in the paint themselves against the Wizards. To come back home today against the Grizzlies and give up 76 points in the paint. Unacceptable. The Bucks were only able to score 36 points in the paint. Like Frank, like you mentioned earlier, when you saw the 3-point discrepancy and you're like, okay, this game is a little close for the Bucks to be shooting this well from three. You look at the points in the paint, and that's an area where the Bucks just got thrashed. Like, Brook Lopez has been a lightning rod of opinions throughout the season about people saying, he's washed, he can't defend, so on and so forth. And it wasn't a great matchup for him tonight with Jaren Jackson Jr. Like, there were just times, especially in the second half, where the Grizzlies are like, just ISO, just give the ball to Jaren, clear out, let him go one-on-one against Brook. And the Bucks were just beat straight line off the dribble a lot in these ISO situations. It wasn't just Brook, it was guards as well. It just was not a clean game defensively for this team. Just the effort levels just haven't been there. And again, I'm not sure if it's towards the end of the season, looking at the competition, just not quite into the game. But that in itself is disappointing to me because, like I mentioned on yesterday's episode of Locked On Bucks, this is not the time of the year where you want to see your team just taking it easy. Like, I get it's a long season, 82 games. Everyone's not going to be perfect. But this is the time of the year where you really want to start to see teams put it together. And what we've seen the last two games from the Bucks in particular haven't been encouraging. Again, 1-4 over their last 5, with the loss to the Lakers at home in the double overtime. The Pelicans lost. They did beat the Hawks, but then you lose back-to-back against Washington and Memphis as well. So again, with the roster not having all the pieces, you kind of look, okay, well, there's a hole here. I mean, we had, again, a lot of point guard Pat Connaughton in this game. We had Ty. We had some really interesting lineups tonight, given the fact that there were some key Bucks out. But Frank, when you're looking at a game like this, coming on the heels of what we've seen from the Bucks, what are you taking away from these games?
I mean, like obviously this isn't the roster and the lineups that you expect slash hope to see in the playoffs. So I mean, it's hard to take anything really away from like specific tactical combinations and things like that. It sucked with Brook because I mean he finally had a big offensive game, 25 points on 14 shots, 10 rebounds. And the lasting memory for most people this game is Triple J just going to work on him, and in the second half just was able to attack him and get to pretty good spots, and sometimes even when he didn't get to great spots, was able to use his touch to finish over him. And I mean the Bucks didn't send any help, right? Bucks didn't try to put Giannis on him. I don't think Giannis would have fared really any better because Giannis isn't really a strong post up defender. So I think again it's just too bad. Obviously you wish that Bucks could have shown more help. I mean Grizzlies weren't exactly like hoisting tons of threes and putting lots of 3-point shooters around Triple J Triple J tonight. Like you would have thought Doc would have like tried to send some help or throw him a little bit of a curveball or something, but not really. So again, it just seems like everybody's just kind of out of ideas right now for the Bucks, and I don't know. I mean, you look at the schedule coming up. I mean, they get the worst team in basketball at the moment on Friday. I have no idea what's going to happen. Honestly, like I have no idea. Like we're gonna get a shell of a Bucks team probably on Friday against a shell of a Raptors team on Friday. Like I have no idea what to expect. I guess I'll watch it because I hate myself, Camille. Thank God I don't have to podcast about it. But anyway, so I have no idea. But thereafter, you get the Knicks at home. I guess what is it? Knicks, Celtics.
And then
I forget.
Orlando.
And then Orlando. Basically all top 4 East teams. So does that mean the Bucks are gonna like actually show up because they're actually playing good teams? Well, that would be nice, but who knows, right? At this point, I just want this team to get healthy. Like I was saying the other day when I was talking to Dan Devine from Ball Don't Lie, like, well, the goal was get the 2 seed and get healthy going into the playoffs. That was really like pretty much like really what you wanted, that in that order. Well, health and then the 2 seed. And clearly I jinxed it because the Bucks are just trying to light that 2 seed on fire right now. Although Cleveland's getting blown out by the Suns right now at
Thank you,
halftime.
Phoenix.
I mean, Cleveland's just playing like crap. The Knicks have lost a bunch of games. I mean, all these teams in the East are just backing their way in. Like all the basically top 4 seeds in the East look like, other than the Celtics, look like play-in teams in in the West right now. So thankfully we're rooting for a team in the East, right? So yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously that Knicks game is massive because of the swing factor. Bucks can't lose the home court, or sorry, the tiebreaker with the Knicks either way because they already are up 3-1 in that season series. But I mean that's a huge swing game. Obviously, if they lose that game and the Knicks win, obviously that's huge for the Knicks' chances of moving up. But yeah, I mean, who knows, right? And you get what, the Thunder and Magic then again to close the season. Who knows if those teams will have stuff to play for or not? Those teams could be resting a bunch of people. Those teams could be super incentivized to try to win because of playoff seeding. Like we have no idea at this point. So I think if you're the Bucks, like, groin injury to Dame, like when he eventually had surgery 2 years ago and missed like a huge portion of the season, it started off as a groin injury.
That is true.
Gonna assume that's not another version of that, but obviously it's worrying because those types of muscle injuries linger, and as we've seen with Giannis, this hamstring thing has been lingering for a month, and now it looks like it was as worse, as bad as it's been. A night after looking physically awesome, tonight obviously he just looked really compromised, and just because he's Giannis, sort of played through it. So yeah, I don't know. Well, are we going to see a full version of the Bucks again before the end of the regular season? I hope so, but I think all bets are off at this point with this team, and yeah, you're just hoping that they can come together and get a favorable matchup in the first round, I guess. I don't know, right? It's just a weird time with this team right now, and I mean, the thing I'm probably most worried about is just other than the health is just where are these guys' heads at this point? Like, I don't know. Maybe they don't care that much because they're not worried about seeding and they just want to get to the playoffs. I mean, it kind of seems like they just want to get to the playoffs the way they're playing. But I don't know. I mean, are they all sitting around questioning WTF is going on? Like we are? I don't know, right? Like if they're all having doubts, I mean, I'm sure the coaching staff is scratching their head saying, "What the heck is going on?" Because they clearly have not been able to dial up any answers here the past 24 hours. But you can go back, obviously, like really since the beginning of the Doc tenure. Obviously, it's been a pretty up and down, and overall, very mediocre period in terms of results overall.
Yeah, I believe is it 15-15 now under Doc or something like that. I believe they're a 500 team right now under Doc. But
Can always go back to Joe Prunty, Camille.
I thought you were going to say Adrian Griffin, so I'm happy you went with Joe Prunty here.
By the way, this is like these people like I was on Twitter like apparently the like Adrian Griffin truther people or something like that, like coming out like, oh, they never should have fired Adrian Griffin. Okay, if you want to argue that they shouldn't have fired Adrian Griffin because your only chance of winning next year is by basically just biting the bullet, taking the L on the season, and then firing Griff this summer, and then having a proper coaching search in the summer, and by hiring Doc and having to commit to him, you've denied yourself that opportunity of having a real coaching search. That I like. I mean, on the one hand, it's like I think you're punting on this season, which is one of maybe 2 seasons you're going to have with this core to actually contend, which is it's a pretty hard pill to swallow, which obviously John Horst and the ownership was not willing to do. But I can at least entertain that theoretical argument. But the idea that like Griff was like the answer, and they gave up a
Too
guy
early.
that actually, like that. Again, people like the mistakes with coaches are always the hires. So if you want to say that Doc was a bad hire, hey, you're probably going to be proven right, because odds are we're always at the Bucks we're not going to win a championship making a change midseason no matter who they hired. But the mistake is not the original sin here was the hiring of Adrian Griffin, right? I don't even think it was the firing of Mike Budenholzer. I love Bud, but I think again, coaches have our expiration dates. I think something had to kind of give there. So again, to me, the when you kind of go back with coaching stuff, it's always who you hired. It's never that you fired a guy too early or whatever, right? I mean, so yeah, if you want to complain about the Bucks coaching, hey, complain about Doc Rivers, who, I mean, let's be honest, like parachuting into to a team mid-season is not
difficult
easy.
situation,
right? That is kind of not exactly a recipe for success, but blame it on Doc. Let's not run around giving, thinking that Adrian Griffin was somehow now like, legitimized and, oh, he was actually a good coach. Because basically what you're saying is that Adrian Griffin's offensive, tactics were brilliant, because that's why the Bucks were good. The Bucks were much worse defensively, but they were great offensively. So the argument is like, well, Adrian Griffin was, an offensive mastermind, so that's why he clearly should have been kept around. Like, come on, guys, like none of this, that logic just doesn't flow either. So anyway, guys, like we can worry about a lot of things, but firing Adrian Griffin, like that ain't on the list.
That wasn't one. But I think that's actually a good place to just kind of take a look.
Stop.
At almost, Frank. Almost.
Give up on the rest of this podcast. Yeah.
Almost. But no, just a look at the Bucks since the coaching switch, and just, I don't want to sound like an Eminem fan where it's like, will the real Bucks please stand up? But like, what is this team exactly? And it's really hard, I think, to really pinpoint on that because of the flux that the roster has been in injury-wise since Doc has really taken over at the helm of this team. But we can dive into that a little bit deeper and then just take a look around the league and what's coming up next for the Bucks after this. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with their 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Research. Market. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. According to my quick Googles here, the Milwaukee Bucks are 17 and 15 since January 23rd. I believe that does not include tonight's loss. I think it actually is 17 and 16 at this point. And coming out of All-Star break with this team, it was very encouraging. You think about when Doc took over, we mentioned it's not going to be a quick turnaround for this team. And when people point to the offense with Adrian Griffin, what we have learned from just hearing what's come out from the team, it seems like the team was laying a lot on their own talent, not really running plays or running actions. It was a big complaint, of course, of like there's not enough two-man game between Giannis and Dame. We want to see more of that. Doc comes in, he's trying to implement the offense, get the players secure around that. And he mentioned they're going to be learning pains with that. Mentioned that, hey, as long as we get the process right, the results might not start coming, but we're working on getting the process. And even in Doc's press conference tonight, he didn't seem outwardly concerned about the prospects of this team going forward, saying like the last 2 nights, like there are things in there that we need to clean up. Point paints for an example of one of them, transition defense, another. He's like, but like nothing that gives me really big pause about what this team can be in the playoffs. For me personally, it's like what you mentioned, Frank, like if this team is healthy, what we've seen when they're all healthy on the floor together, the results speak for themselves. They have been a better team when healthy. They've been a better team when they're playing against good competition. It's just these moments like tonight and last night when they're against competition where you're like, hey, this on the schedule, this should be a game you circle, like take care of business tonight. This should be a good win for the Bucks. Didn't happen that way again for this team tonight. And now we are just a handful of games outside of the playoffs. The Bucks have 4 more home games after kicking off this current 5-game homestand with a loss. They wrap up the regular season, as we mentioned, at home here with the Raptors up next, and then the Knicks. And then after that, you have Boston and Orlando. Then you head to the road and you go to Oklahoma City and Orlando. And at the end of the year, it's always interesting as well because you don't necessarily know what lineups you're going to see because teams do tend to rest players if seeding is not important or something that they can really change at that point. You see guys resting to be healthy heading into the playoffs. And a lot of talk around this team has been the team under Doc. And was this the right decision? And you mentioned the original sin was probably in the hiring of Adrian Griffin. And I've mentioned before in the past as well, if you would have told me after Mike Budenholzer was fired that Doc Rivers was going to be the coach leading this team to the playoffs, I said, we have Doc Rivers at home. Like, I mean, we have, like, why are we doing this? But
I mean, they interviewed like every human being who had ever coached a basketball game, right? That was like the joke. The Bucks interviewed every living person,
everybody.
but not Doc Rivers, right? So that's like the great irony of all this is the guy that like was the only available head coach who was not interviewed last summer ended up getting the job. So, hey, patience for Doc Rivers, right? Just waited and got $40 million or whatever he's
this multi-year coaching deal that he has with the team now. But again, trying to shift through all of the noise around the season, again, long season, but we're getting towards the end of it. There are only 6 games left at this point, and the vibes just don't seem good around this team. We're starting to see them have some of the lapses that you saw them having when Doc was trying to implement things. And at this point, you don't necessarily expect to see that. But all that being said, at this point in the season, Frank, I know we kind of talked about it last night, which is like, I don't know if I trust the Bucks heading into the playoffs at this point, but
no, definitely not.
like this is the team that we have. So
we're free of expectations, Camille. It's a beautiful thing. We've got no expectations. 100%, can see the Bucks losing in 5 to a 7 seed, whoever that might be. So we're expecting the worst. The Bucks are perfectly positioned to, overcome our minimal expectations and pleasantly surprise us, right? Like, hey, Bucks. When the Bucks have been awesome in the regular season, they've always disappointed us. So things are just working out perfectly, Camille. That's my backward logic that I'm going to apply here.
So it seems like, I mean, at this point, it's one of those. I mean, we brought back the throwback, can't trust the Bucks, but it does seem like the wide array of outcomes for this team, where it's like if they were put out in the first round, you're like, that doesn't surprise me. Eastern Conference Finals, I could see that too. NBA Finals, hey, maybe if things break right for them, but I don't know, Frank. It's been the last few weeks in particular have been just a bit disheartening, given how they came out of break initially, and just seeing them kind of stumble now to the finish line. It's bringing my personal confidence down on what to expect with this team.
Yeah, they didn't really have to do a whole lot to make us feel like at least they have had a chance. Like literally just beat like tanking teams with like no NBA players, but that alas has become too high a bar for them, this version of the Milwaukee Bucks. So, oh well. I'm just glad I don't have to podcast the next 2 games, so I can go think about other things. So, Camille,
Yeah.
I hope you have a great week. Listeners, I hope you have a great week. Think about things that are not the Milwaukee Bucks. That would be my recommendation.
Hey, that's a good recommendation. But we will be back with more Locked On Bucks for Friday. Justin and I have some time. This is fresh reactions after watching the embarrassment of losing to. You've seen have you seen the Temptations movie where it's like I'm David Ruffin, these are the Temptations, like it was Jaren Jackson and these are the rest of the Memphis Grizzlies. Like that was the game today where it was just Jaren Jackson Jr. just doing what he wanted to do with the Memphis hustle. But we will be back with more Locked On Bucks, a little bit more time after this game to reflect on what we've seen the last week and also preview what's up forthcoming for the Bucks. That post-game show next week, we might have some scheduling notes about that, but we can talk to you guys about that on Friday's episode. So for Frank and myself, we'll catch you later.